The following story you are about to listen to is from a competition known as an OCT, or an Original Character Tournament. In essence, it is a project where you make a character and try to write a compelling entry against other people, pitting your characters against them in a conflict. As such, this story is going to have some bits of missing context, as the other characters represented have entire backstories to themselves that may not be fully explained due to time constraints. Also, there will likely be many grammatical errors. I do apologize and give you some forewarning. The characters of the Godeater, the Crossguards, Saki, Tenki, Miss X, and the location of the Crossroads all belong to Vashley and the Summer League's organizers. I hope you enjoy this entry. Bloopers at the end. Summer League's Audition, Chapter 6. Saki had been spending the last half-day in the mostly empty Fox's Den, entertaining the occasional straggler. Most of her would-be patrons were outside waiting for an opportunity to impress the Godeater, or were scoping out potential competition. Sightseeing and depression drinking usually started shortly after the roster for the grand tournament was fully announced. Then the unbelievable rushes would follow. She gave a deep and low sigh of boredom as she ran the same rag over the same mugs, dusted the same countertop, and readjusted the same poster that had been plastered all over the other nearby businesses and homes. Some had tried to post them on her door, but her reputation for dealing with vandals and being a previous victor of the tournament kept rabble-rousers away. She did find it rather dull in the off-periods, though. A fox, pure white with a circle drawn on its head to mark it as a familiar, leapt onto her table and tilted its head with a knowing look. "I'll be fine, little one. You can tell the Godeater that by the end of the week I'll be yearning for this boredom again." A large red finger scratched at the creature's neck, which it accepted readily. A large and very poofy tail rose in enjoyment, and little fox chirps of joy leapt from the creature's still-closed mouth. Then a very prominent growl and bark escaped from a very open mouth as the familiar pulled away and spun around. It wasn't just the hackles that were risen, but the hair all along its back and tail stuck straight up in stress and discomfort. Saki, not really accustomed to seeing this from one of the Godeater's familiars, retracted her hand before the small white fox got it in its head to start biting. Not that it would have mattered too much. A moment of hissing and barking was followed by it kicking off of the table as though it were chasing something. Or being chased. Either way, the fox was now sprinting and springing off of just about every surface in her bar, barking and yapping and gnashing its teeth. Saki, for her part, reached for a nearby broom to see if she could assist, though for the life of her she had no idea what had gotten into the creature. Weapon in hand, she rushed from around the other side of the bar, only to find that the fox had already bolted from the establishment, still gnashing its teeth as if it were in a fight. "What in the hell was that?" she said to herself. She scratched at the back of her wine-red hair in morbid confusion. Leonie looked about the establishment to find it felt significantly emptier without the little critter around. She grunted under her breath and turned back to the bar to see if she could get more work done, only to find a newcomer leaning silently against the wooden surface. At least, she thought they were leaning. It was hard to tell considering the entirety of the person was engulfed in a thick brown cloak. "Something I can help you with, stranger?" Saki asked as she returned to her usual spot behind the bar. The person turned their head, but otherwise didn't give a response. She was about to say something again, but gave pause as something unpleasant hit her nose. She stopped in her tracks and gave another sniff to find the source. "You wanna fight about it? I'll square up," came a ragged voice from behind the darkness of the hood. The voice was mildly shocking, but the language he spoke was what made her double-take. Namely, that she could tell he was speaking another language. "That wouldn't end well for you." "Oh, you speak Goblin." Immediately, the man's demeanor changed, and he straightened up to face the bartender directly. Saki offered a shrug in response. "I've had interesting patrons in the past. Also, you smell." "Thank you." The man placed a hand on his chest as though he were flattered. Based on how he spoke, Saki might have actually believed that. "Well, luckily you've caught me in a dead period, so I won't bounce you. Though I will ask what the deal is with the stench." "Tossed in the garbage." "That easy, huh? Well, what brings you to my place?" Leonie raised a brow as an amused smile crept onto her face. "Desperation. Boredom. Think I was kidnapped too. But knowing my boss, it's probably some bullshit about the paid vacation he's been going on about." The ragged man grabbed out a glass of water that she had slid onto the table in front of him. He drank it greedily. "Huh. Well, I guess that'd explain the language barrier. Usually the Godeater takes care of that when people first arrive. Curious as to why that hasn't applied to you. The man wiped his invisible mouth and stared up at her face, curiosity radiating from the empty black hole.
Godeater,
he started.
Sounds a bit awkward to say. That's your local governing body? Are we full on anarchy here? I could be down for that, but I don't got my groove going on, so it'd probably be a mess.
No. The Godeater is our guardian deity.
Named the Godeater.
It was given to her after she... well... Saki rubbed at the back of her head. The absolute mass of hair flopped and floated as a singular entity.
Ate the previous guardian deity.
The Oni gave a shrug of her massive shoulders. Honestly, you'd probably have to talk to her about it. I know the broader details, but the nitty-gritty would be on her marker.
Huh. Still a dumb name.
Saki's amused grin slipped at the comment, but her demeanor remained for the most part unchanged. It had been an opportunity for conversation that she'd been missing since Shifu was nowhere to be found. Bet yours isn't much better. Do you even have a name, stranger?
Nalagram works, if you're that needy for it. You?
You can call me Saki. I'm the owner of this bar. Nalagram nodded as he looked around curiously. Perhaps too curiously for Saki's liking. He seemed casual, even a bit scatty, but there was an air of assessment coming from him that marked him as more aware than he let on.
Expensive place to be so empty. Sorry for your loss.
Saki waved a dismissive red hand as she took his glass from him. Don't worry too much about it. Everyone's currently out and about for the tournament signups. By round 1, this place will be packed to the brim. She watched as the newcomer grabbed at the framed poster and began to assess it. She inwardly hissed at his nasty little hands grabbing her things, but she could probably just wipe it off later.
Tournament, huh? Guess that would explain the rowdy guards and giant-ass line.
Yep, the Grand Crossroads Tournament, hosted by the Madam of the Crossroads. Or the Godeater, if that makes it easier. The poster tapped back onto the table, and Nalagram reeled his head back in a groan.
Is she gonna have a million titles too? Cause I can get the same experience back home with my boss, and I don't have the capacity to memorize a bunch of different names for what essentially builds up to the biggin.
That brought an amused chuckle from Saki as she brought out another glass of water. This one he sipped at more gingerly. No, just Madam of the Crossroads and the Godeater, at least as far as I know. Though on the subject of your boss, what do you do for a living? Might help explain why you're here in my place, staking it up. Nalagram nodded as he took another gulp before setting his glass down.
I'm a necromancer by trade, though technically I'm still an apprentice, which mostly translates to being my boss's toady.
Like those guys that summon dead folk and ghosts and stuff? Saki couldn't help but feel her eyes shoot up at the word necromancer. Not that she was necessarily afraid of death, but she didn't know how she felt meddling with forces like that.
It's a broader field than you'd expect. Most of your core classes tend to be about communication and interpretation. Sometimes we raise the dead, but more often than not, it's a fuel source thing.
His explanation was casual, desensitized, bored even. Like the conversation at hand was a perfectly normal thing to be talking about. Huh. So then what about your boss? What's his deal?
Oh, he's the Dark Lord, the conqueror of nations, destroyer of kingdoms.
Saki blinked as silence set in. She stared blankly at Nalagram as she waited for a joke or a punchline. When none came, she leaned in again to get a better look at the fellow. So you're the apprentice to the actual Dark Lord, where you come from. Like horrible armies that wreak havoc across the countryside.
Well, it's mostly just me that does a lot of the grunt work, but yeah, that's the gist of it.
She stared down at the man in disbelief. This guy, who stood more than a head shorter than her and couldn't have weighed more than 180 pounds soaking wet, was the servant of a horrible and powerful tyrant? She served all types, but this was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, not buying it,
she finally replied after a moment of assessment.
The dingus dangus, you mean you're not buying it?
The man spun his head up to look her dead in the eye. Offense rang in his voice. I mean, I'm not buying that you're some apprentice of some evil fantasy villain floating about plotting the downfall of civilization. For starters, the Godeater wouldn't let someone so dangerous just go running around unimpeded in her own home. Hell, if you were brought here, you'd be more than likely an honored guest, invited to join the tournament only to get your ass handed to you when you got too big for your britches. It was perhaps a bit overly harsh, but this Nalagram guy was more of an assault on her nostrils than a threat to the Crossroads. Though the little man didn't back down. Hell, he doubled down as he stood up at the fullest extent of his unimpressive height.
Unimpeded my ass! I ain't been able to speak that language since I got here, and there sure as shit ain't no ghost for me to use to generate a comprehend language spell. Besides, what makes you so confident this Godeater can take me on? I'm the damn headliner here.
Because her personal apartment sits on top of my establishment, and I've seen her do things you can only dream of, deadhead.
Oh, really?
Nalagron replied with a sudden interest, a wide, toothy grin spreading on his face. She might have been a good deal taller, broader, and more intimidating than him, but something about the way he said that made her spine tingle.
Well, seeing as how I don't got a place to stay for the night, and I don't know when my boss is gonna pick me up, how's about renting the room out to me for the time being?
In your dreams, Toady. Like I'd let someone calling themselves the Dark Lord's apprentice stay in my place, even if the room wasn't permanently booked. The grin on his face deepened, and she could have sworn she saw a glint of red beneath the edge of his hood.
Guess we'll see about that,
he said chipperly as he stood up from his seat. She rolled her eyes at the gesture. Well, good luck with that. The only way I'm giving you entrance to that room is if she lets you in there, and I'm sorry to say, my guy, that you're not her type. The little man shrugged as he turned to leave, extending a hand out in a friendly gesture.
Guess there's only one way to find out. Thanks for the water.
Thanks for the conversation, Saki replied, her large hand engulfing his as she shook it gently. Then she stopped. Something felt wrong. His hand was sticky, slimy, and not at all pleasant to hold. She sniffed. What's on your hand?
Mayonnaise.
His body made a very satisfying bounce on the ground as she flung him out the front door. Though he didn't stay down for long. He quickly rose to his feet and gave a dramatic wave as his cloak fluttered in the breeze. He then swiftly disappeared down a nearby street. She could have sworn that she saw deep red eyes peering from underneath that hood at her. And as he scurried off into the rapidly descending evening, she couldn't help but feel as though she had released something truly awful into her home. Oh boy, that was a rough one. Saki had been spending the last half day in the mostly empty fox's den, entertaining the occasional straggler. Oop.
Desperation. Boredom. I think I was kidnapped too, but knowing my boss, it's probably some bullshit about that paid vacation he was going on about.
Oh wow, that takes a lot of breath. Whew, I'm lightheaded.